down, there is something more important than the winning bid. Then he sighs and gets normal, saying wait a moment. Then sit there, look aside, saying to the administrator that their smithy is so busy that they don't have time to prepare the equipment for all the soldiers. The administrator asks if is that so, and then Youngwoo sits there looking toward the armor that he crafted and thinks thanks to this auction he is certain of it now. Although it takes more time, high-level equipment makes more money than lower-level ones, let's refuse him for now. After this, the administrator says it must take a lot of time and effort just to create a single item, alright. Then he politely requests that Youngwoo craft the equipment for the knights. Only hearing this, Youngwoo smile. Then the administrator looked toward the item that Youngwoo crafted and said that the item he delivered must be of the same quality and higher than the ones he brought today. Also, he understands that it is difficult work, so the pay will be increased an additional 10% compared to today's winning bid. This way be an exceptional suggestion, but if he accepts it, he must abide by the demands. Hearing this, Youngwoo sits there smiling, thinking epic equipment. He isn't an idiot, he sometimes gets normal ratings even with 20 hours of work. And he is going to get penalized. Who would be crazy enough to accept this suggestion just for a few more pennies? After this, he returns. While on the way he gets the notification that business with the administrator has been done. Also, it was written on the notification that upholds his side of the contract with Administrator Vladi, who has asked him to produce more equipment. In the clear conditions section, it was written that deliver 3 level 120 to 180 epic grade swords within a week. If he clears this quest, the reward will vary on the quality of the items, but if he fails this quest, the business deal gets cancelled, and all additional quests will be destroyed. Youngwoo, reading the notification, thinks he ended up accepting this deal and the quest. However, while on the way return from that auction house, he smiled, thinking he needed to make some money right now since he managed to make 2 epic items. Amongst the last 3, it's not impossible to clear this quest. It took him 20 hours to make one of them, so he will somehow make it within 1 week. After this, standing outside the auction house, Youngwoo turns his head and looks toward that house and remembers Stang's words when he smiles, telling him to follow the lady. He is in for a good surprise. Remembering this, Youngwoo thinks Stang was so happy for him, but he didn't manage to say goodbye to him. Then he turns and steps ahead, telling himself the auction is a success from today onward. Then he looks up toward the sky and cheers up loudly, saying he is rich. However, during the past few months, Erlstein has been thoroughly searching and destroying the Yaten Church. A dangerous group of religious worshippers sacrificing young virgin women, and the Earl's daughter Irene had once been kidnapped by them. During her rescue operation, the Stein family's strongest Shadow Doran was killed. However, the situation in the area north of Winston changed when a lot of people attacked them along with their soldiers and killed the people there. The soldiers holding their swords in hand attacked and killed the people as they were killing the people of that area. A soldier holding his sword after killing the people abuses them, saying they are so persistent as they stand there on the hillside. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blows from upside, and the lady appears there, sees her. The soldier surprisingly asks his companion, someone coming, who's that? Moreover, this was nobody else but the Blood Witch Yura, who appeared on the battlefield. Stands there upside looking toward the soldiers and the situation. He thinks there are a lot of them. This may take longer than usual. As she stood there, a notification window appeared before her that 8 servant SS, and it was written on the notification that save the believer from the Stein troops and become the 8 servants of the Yaten Temple. Furthermore, in the clear reward section, it was written that she would get the position of 8 servants, including 8 servants' obtention of skill, infinite faith, teaching doctrines, and divine punishment. Bun, on the other hand, if she fails in clearing this quest, her level will be reached at -5 and the faith -1000. Reading the notification panel, she thinks it's an invaluable SS grade quest. She absolutely must clear it. Then she thinks about her feelings when she met Angus, the 7th ranker, the helplessness she felt facing an epic class holder. However, standing there, she creates her black wavy magic aura to attack them, and the soldier stands far from her, notice that she is planning something. One of them, looking toward Yura, says to his companions that she is planning something against them. The other one replies to prepare themselves. Yura, creating her magic, ran toward them, thinking stronger. She needed to be stronger. Then she created the black magic ball, jumped up and threw this ball at them. Thinking they become the number 1 rank, the soldiers standing down looked up toward that black magic ball that was about to fall on them. On the other side of Winston's castle, Lady Irene, sitting on her throne, shouts at her soldier when he informs her there are 412 casualties and 5 knights are gravely injured. Hearing this, she hit her fist on the chair arm and raised her voice asking the enemies only number 150. Then she asks if is he telling her that 1,000 soldiers with 8 knights were defeated at their hands. While her soldier kneeling before her replies according to the report there was an incredibly skilled opponent, and they believe that it was one of the 7 servants. Hearing this, she with a sad face holds the pendant ring that she wears and thinks Doran will avenge him. After this, she shouted and released that pendant ring from her hand and hit her fist on the chair arm, saying recognize the subjugation group to strengthen it. On the other side, Youngwoo in the smithy was preparing the items for the administrator as he prepared the sword and put it on the table before him. However, the interface about that sword information appeared there as its durability, attack power, and user restriction were good. Its level was plus 160. Also, this sword was intermediate sword mastery, but its rating was normal. Khan sits at Youngwoo's back and looks towards the sword. He says it may be a normal item, but it's still quite an amazing sword. Youngwoo, with a disappointed facial expression, was looking toward the sword. He shouted at Khan, asking if he was kidding, and if it was a normal grade. Khan gets scared by this behavior and steps backwards, replaying. He surprises him why he is so angry. Youngwoo holds his head and starts crying loudly. As he was sobbing answering Khan, he could only buy the materials for 7 swords with his money, and he just ruined one of them. To reach the requirements of 3 epic swords, he only needs 1 epic for every 2 swords at least. Khan stands behind him and smiles, saying, but if he sells this, he will still get 800 golds. Youngwoo hearing this turns his head and looks toward Khan with teary eyes. Answering, and the materials cost is 900 gold, thinking, is that supposed to reassure him? However, Khan says he is using all his energy and spending over 20 hours to craft a single item. Hard work will never betray his trust in himself and try again. Hearing this, Youngwoo sighs and replies he guesses he is right. Youngwoo took a deep breath and started making items again, and this time with great effort he made the durable long sword. An interface appeared before them about the sword as its durability, attack power, and user restriction were good. Level was 160 plus. Its strength was 950 plus, and it was an intermediate sword mastery, but at this time its rating was also normal. Seeing this, Khan stands behind Youngwoo sweat, saying if he sells this, he will get 800 gold. Youngwoo turns his head and loudly shouts at Khan to consider him a scammer. After this, Youngwoo gets out of the smithy and stands outside the smithy. He loudly screams and lifts his arm, saying operators are useless pieces of trash. Stop manipulating the probabilities. He will ask for a prosecution at customer service. Stand there, he cries and clenches his teeth, looking up with teary eyes and thinking so much for a legendary blacksmith. Now he only has 5 chances left. However, he starts his sword again with all his might, thinking it is unique and legendary. What a joke! After a long time of hard work, he crafts a long silver sword. He stares at the sword in his hand, and he gets the notification that its rating is rare and stares at his sword he thinks is even rare, barely appearing. After this, he returned home. He sat there at the breakfast table, having his breakfast, thinking still concentrate if he concentrated. His sister Nehi sits at the chair next to him, and surprisingly looks toward him. He goes to Khan's smithy where he starts crafting the items. He makes the sword with all his might, but at this, its rating is also normal. Standing there, he felt that he was dizzy and his mouth was watering, and standing there, he held that sword thinking it still won't happen. However, he starts making the items again with all his might, while hammering the blade. He thinks he doesn't care anymore, whatever happens, happens. 1 week later, Youngwoo crafted so many different types of swords as these swords were lying on the table, and Khan stood before the table. Looking toward the sword, asking for 2 epics, 1 rare and 3 normal. He is missing a single epic, but this is still a great achievement. While Youngwoo was hammering the blade there, he didn't respond to Khan. Moreover, Khan stands behind Youngwoo and asks time-wise that once his last sword is alright. Youngwoo slightly and turns his head, saying he is fine, he has cleared his mind, he is dead either way. As Youngwoo was hammering the blade, Khan stepped toward him, asking how Pagma's descendants acted so feebly. Youngwoo with a sad face laughs, asking Pagma, then replies don't know him, he is only a normal's descendant. Then heating that blade in a furnace blast, he thinks his last blade, and his chance of getting an epic is nil. He is dead. Then he closes his eyes holding that sword and thinks his last sword is no use crying over spilt milk, let's just take a break. As he stood there holding that sword, suddenly a bright light came out of that sword, and he stood there, closed his eyes because the light was so bright, then looked toward the sword and became speechless. As the light spread all around him, he stood there clenching his teeth, thinking how to stop making such a fuss. Then he abused, considering that the sword was also the normal rating sword. However, it's getting dark, and he still stands there holding that sword, also the bright light is coming out of it. The bright light in the form of waves spread in the sky, and he put that sword on the table. That bright wave light entered the smithy from the roof and fell on the sword that lying on the table. A bright light spreads there all around the sword and goes near the sword and holds it in his hands. A bright aura comes out of the sword, and he holds that sword surprisingly, asking just what is happening. His mouth is wide open as he was surprised, saying he had given up already, so just leave him be, as he stood there. Meanwhile, a notification window appeared before him about that sword, as it was the sword of self-transcendence. Its durability, attack power, attack speed, accuracy and parry rate were at good points. Also in the description section, it was written additional damage of opponent level 200 plus with each attack generation of the skill was a perfect state of self-transcendence. Its user restriction was level 160 plus, strength was 950 plus, and it was the advanced sword mastery level 2. Also, its rating was legendary. Youngwoo in shock stood there holding that sword while the wavy purple light was coming out of the sword. Meanwhile, he gets the notification that all stats have risen by 25 due to the creation of legendary items. His reputation is 1000 plus throughout the continent, and the Title 1 legendary item maker has been acquired. Youngwoo still stands there holding that sword in shock, and he starts sweating, thinking how this could be. Meanwhile, Khan got there, turned his head and looked toward Khan. Khan was also shocked to see that the sword, and his blood pressure increased and he fell backwards unconscious. The next day Youngwoo was taking care of Khan and was trying to bring him to his senses, saying, "Old man, don't die, he still hasn't cleared his class quest." On the other side, at Irene Temple, the old man, the head of the soldiers, comes to her informing them that with a sad face, he is deeply ashamed the second subjugation group has also been defeated. Irene, looking out of the window, asks that person he believes to be a member of the 7 servants, and the old man replies, "Unfortunately, she is correct, Lady Irene." Then she turns her head and, looking toward the old man, says she sees, "Sought the success of this subjugation lies in whether they can defeat this enemy or not." The man replies, "This is the case, however, they currently need reinforcements, therefore, they can't make a move for now." Irene, looking out of the window, says there is nothing they can do then, although it may take a while, and she will avenge Doran. While looking out of the window, she surprisingly asked who it that when the man before her outside was swimming in the waterfall. And this man was nobody else but Youngwoo, who was finding the money in that waterfall. As soon as he finds the money, he excitedly heads up in the waterfall and lifts his hand holding the money that he found money. Then he lovingly hugged the gold coins and put them near his face, lovingly saying gold coins, his first time picking up money. However, the administrator opened the door and entered, asking Lady Irene if she present, and Irene turned her head asking what is the matter. Then she pointed toward the window outside the waterfall where Youngwoo was swimming and asked the perfect time administrator if there was a suspicious individual in the garden. The administrator replies she has noticed him already, he is called Grid, she needs to meet that man immediately. She looks toward the administrator and surprisingly asks Grid. After this, they call Youngwoo's main hall. There Irene was sitting on her throne, and the old man soldier and the administrator stand both sides of his throne. While Youngwoo sitting on his knees on the ground before her, Irene looks toward Youngwoo and the administrator stands. Says this man has received an order to create swords for knights after the last auction, and he is also the one to have stopped the Miro Company's tyrannical rules. Hearing this, Irene smiled, saying the rumored blacksmith she was planning on meeting, but some circumstances had taken up her time. As she looked toward Youngwoo and smiled, while Youngwoo sat there on his knees, thinking just reward him already, but where has he seen that woman before? After this, the administrator, looking toward Irene, says, "Take a look at this. It's a sword that man has produced." Saying this, he removes the cloak from the sword table. As soon as he removed the cloak, the legendary sword lying before them on the table, and the bright light spread all around it. Then showing that sword to her, administrator says, as she can see, it is an incredible weapon. Seeing the sword, both Irene and the soldier's head get shocked. With their mouth wide open, the soldier's head standing behind Irene surprisingly says, "This is a sword of unbelievable power, lady." And the Lady Irene, looking toward the sword, surprisingly asks just how he created such an astonishing sword. After some time, they held a meeting where Lady Irene sat on the chair and Youngwoo sat before her on the chair. Sitting there, Youngwoo asks her, "Let start the talks already, how much will she pay for it?" And he is certain she said she would increase the pay the better the weapons turn out to be. Lady Irene, looking toward the sword lying before her on the table, thinks it an unbelievable sword. With this weapon they could surely, and then she said, "Call Phoenix." He came near her, and she turned her head and looked toward him, asking if he were to wield this sword, would he be a match to the 7 servants? Phoenix replies, with this sword, he can defeat them. After this, Lady Irene stands up and steps toward Youngwoo, saying, "Very well, then there is no need to hesitate." Youngwoo sits there, stays silent, and doesn't respond. Then she goes near him and extends her hand toward him, asking to administrator to purchase this sword. She shall leave him to decide the price. As she extends her hand toward Youngwoo, he sits there on his knees, holds her hand, and kisses it. She stood before him, asked his name, was that correct? Let them meet more often. As he held her hand, he noticed the pendant ring on her neck. He stared at the ring, thinking about the ring. Where did he see it? After this, he kisses her hand, thinking, who cares? He like Winston's new ruler, she is flexible and open-minded, very good. After some time, Youngwoo waits there in the meeting room. He sits on the couch, and the administrator enters there, saying he has made him wait and sorry for that. Youngwoo replies, "Be quick, he is tired from all the hammering," and then the administrator sits before the chair, saying he understands he must have concentrated all his energy and mind to create that masterpiece. Youngwoo sat there, folded his arms, looked toward him with a tired facial expression, and replied, "Don't think of swindling him. It took him almost 1,000 gold to make a single item." Youngwoo is surprised when the administrator tells him they will purchase that sword for 220,000 gold. Youngwoo takes a deep breath and asks for 220 gold is far too little. And then Youngwoo gets silent. The administrator sits before him and smiles, telling him not 220 golds, 220,000 golds, boy. They have come up with this price as they plan to make this sword the Steim family's heirloom. Hearing that large amount, Youngwoo was about to fall backwards when the administrator sitting before him surprisingly looked toward him. After this, he got up, went near the wall, and put his head on the wall corner and started crying. Sees this, the administrator sits on the chair and asks him if is it too little, then says the yearly budget of Winston is 170,000 golds. This is the most they can give him. While Youngwoo kept his head on the corner of the cry, sobbing, also putting his hand on his mouth. As he stood, there was cried, thinking 220,000 gold was 264 million won, and he still had 254 million won left after paying back his debt. While crying, standing beside the corner of the wall, Youngwoo put his hand on his mouth, thinking, wait, if he put this up for purchase on an online transaction site, he might get even more. No, there is nobody who can use it right now due to the requirements, let's just sell it now. After this, he excitedly thinks his 26 years of hardships were all leading up to this day, and he can now go to the high school reunion party wearing luxurious clothes and an expensive car. Furthermore, he flies in the air, thinking, let's declare his love to Ah-hyung, his first crush again. Spring has finally arrived. Meanwhile, the administrator goes to Youngwoo and puts the box in front of him, while Youngwoo stands beside the wall, turns his head, and smiles, saying all right, he will sell it at that price. The administrator, giving him the box, replies, a wise decision, and this is a token of their sincere gratitude. Youngwoo takes the box, asking what are these, and the administrator replies, blue orichalcum, it is a rare ore, it will be of use to him. Seeing that blue orichalcum box, Youngwoo thinks this is the material he needs for failure. He thinks he needs 50 of them, now lucky. After this, the administrator stands there, closes his eyes, saying great, then lets them finalize the transaction with this. Standing there, Youngwoo was staring at the orb, and while staring at it, he got the notification that the quest was clear, 234,000 golds acquired by selling the 3 swords. Also, 3 pieces of blue orichalcum obtained, the stats Winston's person of distinction obtained. Then another interface appears before him, that Winston person of distinction, a status given to the technique that Winston's ruler acknowledges. Furthermore, works produced will be recognized as high quality in Winston, and will be exempt from all taxes there. After this, Youngwoo asks him for a bonus, then he cheers up, thinking he won't have to pay taxes when he inherits the smithy. This is great. Then looking toward the administrator, he says thanks for everything. Then he excitedly thinks let's log out there for today because he can't wait to tell everyone at home. Therefore, he logged out of the game and returned to his home. Also he made it rich, and so thought Shin Youngwoo. However, he had made enormous losses, while there currently were no users to wield the sword, and many users would gain advanced sword mastery within the next few months. Considering the supply of items that would be on the market, his legendary grade item would have sold for several billion won. Nevertheless, this event was the start of a new life for him. Youngwoo was running toward his home and finally, he arrived. He excitedly opened the home door, calling his parents and sister, also telling them everything was going to be fine now as he was about to tell them. But he was also surprised to see when he entered his family members sitting there on the chairs with sad faces heading down. Sees this, he asks what happened, why is everyone gloomy, did something happen? His sister Sehi with a sad face and teary eyes replies, brother, the loan guarantee father signed is 800 million won. However, at night time still, they were with sad faces heading down to sit on the chairs. Youngwoo's father, a sad face, said to his family members, don't worry too much. If they sell the house and use all their savings, they can pay back at least 400 million won. And he has nothing to say to everyone. Hearing this, Youngwoo sits there on the chair looking toward his father and thinks he can't believe their stubborn and headstrong father is breaking down due to a loan guarantee. It is depressing. As Youngwoo and Mehi sit there before their parents head down, Nahi's tears fall on the table. However, Youngwoo's mother, looking toward them, says they will have to use money they have been saving for Sehi's university and her wedding. And then with teary eyes, she apologizes to her daughter. Youngwoo, hearing this with a sad face, gets shocked. After this, he asks his parents if isn't he also part of this family. His father heads up and looks toward him asking so. As Youngwoo was about to speak, his sister Nahi added her point, saying she didn't need to go to university, she would also help out by doing part-time jobs. Hearing this, Youngwoo sit beside her and thinks she can't be serious. However, Youngwoo's father, mother, and sister hugged each other and burst into tears while Youngwoo with a sad face was looking toward them. His father, while crying, tells his daughter nonsense, he will make sure she properly finishes her studies. Youngwoo's mother, while crying, says to her daughter there is no need for her to go so far. Sehi replies to their father and mother that she is fine. While Youngwoo sits there looking aside thinking, well, it would be a shame to make her work when she always ranks first in the entire school. After this, he gets up saying all right, he will make the money, and Sehi don't worry about anything and continue studying. Hearing this, his family members surprisingly look toward him, and they again start bursting into tears. His father, while crying, says he will look for a better job starting tomorrow. His mother, crying, says she will also try working in a restaurant. Sehi, while crying, hugged her parents, saying she would also work part-time during weekends. Seeing this, Youngwoo raised his voice saying don't look down on him, he made a lot of money through the game, over 200 million won. Hearing this, his parents get shocked and his father surprisingly asks what, and Youngwoo sits there thinking he will save his family himself. It's time he takes responsibility for something. The next day at Irene's castle, she gives the sword of self-transcendence to Phoenix, and he kneels before her to receive that sword, saying he bestows it upon the commander of the Jotun subjugation forces. The Phoenix vows to return victorious and protect the glory of the North and Earlstein. Irene raised her voice saying advance, being her the head of one of the 7 servants. Then standing there, Irene presses her lips thinking, while they only number 150, they have a member of the 7 servants by their sides. They can't let down their guards this time, they will dispatch 12 knights and 1,500 more solid. They have finally managed to gather this many troops, they must win this time, as the war was about to start between the Jotun Church and Earlsteins. Phoenix with his Amory sitting on his horse raises her hand, saying do not falter, he Phoenix the strongest in the north shall lead them to victory and bring back the head of one of the 7 servants. As Phoenix and his army move toward them, Yura and her people stand at the hill where look toward them. Seeing them coming toward them, Yura's soldier tells her the dirty pagans are back again. Lady Yura. The soldiers sit on the hill and smile, saying they must lay waste to them and offer them to God Jotun. And if she takes on those ground forces, they shall support her from behind. She turns her head and looks toward her companion, thinking of the members of this church, including the core members called the 7 servants, are wicked with no precedent, while she feels skeptical to accept their quest. And she can't turn back until she receives a hidden class like Agnes and Cats. However, she jumps down the hill, and seeing her Phoenix sitting on his horse silently looking toward her, she jumps down on the ground safely. As soon as she flies down, the wind turns toward her and starts swirling around her quickly. She kneels on the ground and says to Phoenix he has finally shown himself he wicked servant. Today is the day his evil deeds come to an end. Then she creates the magic ball in her hand and looks toward the Phoenix thinking that they consider her as evil as the 7 servants. Still, she must complete her mission no matter the cost. However, after creating her black magic ball, she throws it toward the Phoenix and his people saying, "Great God of the darkness, reveal his power to the world." As the ball started moving in her hand quickly and the black aura started swirling around her, also the sky there turned black with her magic. Sees this, Phoenix sits there on his horse and says the sky has also turned black. She looks toward Phoenix, thinks she must protect the believers, and then throws the dark storm toward them with all her might. She attacks on them with her dark storm and stands there still holding that magic ball in her hand, thinking she has destroyed about 1/4 of their forces. As she was creating her black magic, meanwhile Phoenix, flying on his horse, got near her furiously, and she stood down there and looked up toward him. Seeing him up on her head side and getting scared, thinking it's impossible, he managed to block the dark storm. After this, she attacks him with her diamond barrier, but he strikes his self-transcendent sword on that diamond barrier with all his might, saying, "Don't even think about laying a finger on his soldier." Then he raises his voice saying that his opponent is he, the perfect state of self-transcendence, and then he breaks her diamond barrier with the one blow of his sword. Seeing this, she stands there creating her magic and gets shocked, thinking the diamond barrier that even managed to block the boss monster was shattered by a single knight's attack. Her mouth opened widely, and she thought this was impossible, and then she attacked him with her hell black magic. Furthermore, hell is a black magic spell that causes a single target to enter a state of fear. As soon as she attacks him, his horse starts rearing. And Phoenix sit on his horse furiously, says her impressive. He didn't think she would go for the horse, also his eyes turn black and bright. And she, while sending her hell magic toward him, thinks nothing is working on him. What should she do now when Phoenix strikes his self-transcendent sword to attack her? As he strikes his sword, he gets the notification that perfect stats of self-transcendence, every stat is double for 2 minutes. Also, the resistance to all stat effects user will lose control of himself during the skill's duration. After the skill is used, the user will be unable to move for 2 seconds and will have his defense and magic resistance decreased by 30%, and its cooldown time is 3000 seconds. However, he strikes his sword to attack her, and she stands there fearfully looking toward him, thinking she has felt this before, this feeling of helplessness. Then he remembers the time when she fought with Youngwoo and gets furious remembering that time. Then she clenches her teeth thinking against that man, and then Phoenix strikes his sword at her and attacks her. She falls away injured, thinking there is nothing she can do now and she can't turn back anymore. The drops of her blood spurt there and she falls while clenching her teeth. However, 17 days ago Yura's faith reached 1 lakh and she heard the voice of God Yaten in her ears. As she was severely injured and covered herself with the black spell, and to cure herself she used the black magic, saying she would bestow upon him her power. Should he wish to receive it, pray, and she needs to be stronger, she needs the power to face against enemies who are immune to black magic. The darkness, and in that darkness her eyes turn red like blood, and the light emerges from it. Lying there in her black spell, she thinks of her enemies and tries to increase her power to defeat her enemies. On the other side, Youngwoo shows his family members his balance account book, telling them it's true. His father checks that balance account book and asks, did he participate in some shady business? His mother surprisingly asks, if is this a fake account? And then his sister Nahi pulls up his shirt asking him if he didn't sell his organs. Did he show her his stomach? Youngwoo gives a tired facial expression to her and stays silent. While thinking, well, who would believe their unemployed 26-year-old son if he suddenly showed them that amount of money? Then he says he gained that money inside the game, so trust him and just use it, while thinking what infuriates him is that when he gained 240,000 golds after selling the Mammon Great Sword and the Mengel armor, he exchanged 220,000 gold into real cash, but got charged 200,000 won as tax, while his mother, surprisingly looking toward Youngwoo, says her friend asked her son, and he said that he needed to be extremely famous in the game to make this much. While Nehi shows his brother's stomach to her parents, she also hears that there must be less than 20 people who make as much as her brother. While Youngwoo was saying she let go of him, Nehi released his shirt, straightened it, and sat on the chair before his father, and his father, looking toward him, says they had been nagging him a lot all this time from a parent's perspective, but if he has made this much money, Then he smiles holding that bank account book and says Youngwoo it's the outcome of all the effort he has made until now. Furthermore, he now approves of the game he has been playing. Hearing this, Youngwoo gets shocked. Then he smiled and blushed, thinking finally he had their approval. After this, his father says to him that they have overcome their crisis, so don't worry about them and do what he wants. His mother and he will make sure to pay back the rest of the debt in the next 3 years, as well as the 240,000 won he has given them. Then his father closes his eyes, saying his father is now greatly indebted to him, and he is sorry Youngwoo. His father gets emotional, and his father puts her hand on her husband's shoulder and relaxes him, saying let's work hard together honey. However, Youngwoo, looking toward his parents, thinks the remaining 600 won debt is still too much for his parents to pay back. Then Youngwoo replies to his father that there are no debts between the family. His father thinks he will help the father. It's time to repay them for everything they have done. Then he also gets emotional and tears come into his eyes, and he controls himself by pressing his lips, while thinking his debts will remain for a while. But he can finally help out his own family. Then he says his father, it's not 240 but 248,000 won father. His father replies to him, all right son. However, Youngwoo spawned in the Winston village, standing near the Khan smithy. He said to himself, all right, let's do his best from today onwards again. Standing there, he used his digital skills and the interface appeared before him. He read that interface, which was about 20,000 gold. He stands there looking toward the interface, thinking he must use the remaining 20,000 golds efficiently. If he gets a normal grade for an item with a high usage requirement, he won't profit from it, even if it has extra options. Furthermore, he thinks if he gets a high grade, it would be perfect, but the probability of that happening is he needs to make level 140 items. If he gets a normal grade for those, its price will still balance out the production costs. As he stood there, he noticed two people standing at his back talking to each other, and he listened to their conversation when the girl asked the boy there, did he hear the news that the Yatan temple subjugation groups were defeated again? Youngwoo stepped ahead and listened to their conversation. The girl stands in the distance to Youngwoo and tells the boy that they say that Sir Phoenix, the North's strongest knight, was seriously injured. Hearing this, the boy standing before her says sounds like the person from the Even Servants is extremely powerful. Youngwoo stand there in the distance listening to their conversation with Think 7 servants. He has heard a lot about them from the customers chatting at the smithy. Youngwoo uses his digital skills and the interface appears before him about his status window. He touches that interface thinking, are they that strong? As he checks his status, he is happy to see his status strength, mana, agility, intelligence, dexterity, persistence, composure, indomitable, dignity, insight, and courage have increased so much than before. Reading his status, he thinks his status increased a lot from all the crafting. He has long since surpassed the stats of an ordinary level 80 warrior. As long as he equipped the appropriate items, he could even hunt level 100 monsters. Thinking this, he heads down, telling himself he wants to hunt monsters like the good old days. Well, as for now, he has to return to his work to repay the debt. However, he goes to the smithy and starts working there. As he is hammering the iron rod, Khan gets there from the entrance door, asking him if he is there. He began working earlier today. Youngwoo stop hammering there and turn his head, replaying Khan. He needs to work seriously from now on. However, Youngwoo start hammering the iron rod again, and Khan stands behind him looking toward him, ask indeed a spectacular posture, so what is he making this time? Youngwoo answers with a crafting hammer. The durability of the hammer he has been using is almost at 0. After this, Khan stands there surprisingly, ask he does notice him using that worn down hammer all this time, so he is going to change it. Doesn't it mean a lot to him? Youngwoo turns his head and replies not at all, while thinking he has been using it since it's the only one he has. Hearing this, Khan gets shocked and then surprisingly asks what. Therefore, Khan gets furious and asks him if he is out of his mind. The hammer is the blacksmith's most important tool, and Youngwoo stands there turning his head, saying he surprised him. After this, Khan sighed and held his head, saying he thought he would be aware of it since he was a Pagma descendant. Then Khan holds the hammer in his hand and sounds have a look at his hammer. Youngwoo take the hammer from him. After giving that hammer to Youngwoo, Khan says when crafting battle gear, the materials, devotion, and technique aren't the only important aspects. Youngwoo, staring at the hammer in his hand, says appraisal. Then he thinks the hammer appears before him. As it was written on the interface, it is an excellent blacksmith hammer. Its rating is rare, and its durability attack power is good. Its probability power of creating an item is 10%. Its level was 80 strength 60 plus. And it was the intermediate blacksmith craftsmanship as Youngwoo read that interface and was staring at the hammer. Meanwhile, another notification window appears before him that he has grasped the materials, the production method, and the creator's intent of this item. He has learned the production method of the excellent blacksmith's hammer as Youngwoo, reading the interface, gets excited. While Kan stands before him and tells him with a better hammer, he wouldn't have gone through that much trouble. Hearing this, Youngwoo smiles and stays silent. And then, after a minute, Kan angrily asks why he is telling him this now, and Youngwoo fearfully replies, "Calm down, try making one now." Moreover, he crafts that unknown master blacksmith hammer as its rating was epic, durability, attack power, probability of creating rare item was a good point. Also, its user requirement was Pagma descendant. Youngwoo held that hammer as the bright light came out of it, and he said he was right. There even were additional options, and it was a personal hammer only he could use. After this, Kan stands there, scratches his beard, and smiles, saying he is quite the unpredictable one. He has been having a good laugh thanks to him recently. Then Kan stands there behind Youngwoo and tells him he has a request for him, and Youngwoo angrily turns his head, asking a request. What request? Kan replies that today is the anniversary of his son's death, and then he asks Youngwoo if would he be willing to visit his grave with him. Hearing this, Youngwoo gets surprised and silent, and then goes with Kan to his son's grave. They both arrive at the cemetery and stand there. Kan steps ahead toward the grave of his son while Youngwoo stands behind, thinking it's awkward. Stand there. Youngwoo thinks Kan is the only person who accepts him as he is both in reality and the game his only friend. Let's listen to his request. However, Kan stands in the cemetery, turning his head and telling Youngwoo this is the cemetery where all of his ancestors are buried. Then, pointing toward the grave, he says this is his son Oliver's grave. His son was also an excellent blacksmith. Also, he thought he would one day reach the same heights as Sir Albertino. Then he sits near the grave of his son and, putting his hand on the tombstone, says but he left the world at a young age due to a disease. Sitting there with teary eyes, Kan says 10 years have passed, but he still misses him dearly. Every day, he wishes that he could switch his lifespan with his. However, Youngwoo stands behind his back, and Kan sits near the grave of his son, asking Oliver if he can recognize who this is. Then Kan, sitting near his son's grave, explains to him about Youngwoo, who is Pagma's descendant, the blacksmith he kept asking him to tell him stories about. Then, touching the tombstone of his son's grave, he asks if he is surprised, and then he replies that he is working with such a great person. He also saved their smithy. Youngwoo stood behind, surprised at hearing Kan's words. The strong gust of wind blew, and the leaves of trees passed by him. Then Kan sits there, closes his eyes, telling his son's grave that he has also stopped drinking alcohol with his help. Not only that, but he will also inherit their smithy. Then he laughs, asking his son's grave, "Is that so?" Then he sits there and tells Youngwoo, who stands behind him, to listen. Youngwoo surprisingly looks toward him, then Kan turns his head, saying his son says he is so jealous of him. Furthermore, he smiled, saying Youngwoo thanked God for bringing him with him today. Youngwoo stood at the back, got emotional, and with teary eyes, he called Kan's name, then stepped toward Oliver's grave. While thinking stupidly satisfied they should have made the game a reality, and they poured a soul and emotion into the NPC. After this, Youngwoo puts his hand on the tombstone, saying Mr. Oliver sees this. Kan head up and looks toward Youngwoo. Then Kan stands near the grave, smiling and placing his hand on the tombstone, saying his father is his dearest friend. He will make the smithy he loves into the greatest smithy ever. Then Youngwoo smiles, saying that's why he keeps watching over him and old man Kan. Hearing this, Kan gets emotional, sits with teary eyes, and looks toward Youngwoo, calling his name. As they both were in the cemetery, a strong wind blew. Youngwoo stood there and put his hand before his face. Meanwhile, he gets the notification that the bond between him and Kan has deepened. However, the strong, bright light emerges from his body, and the white aura appears from the graves. The souls of people buried in that cemetery come out of the graves and move toward Youngwoo. Sees this, Youngwoo gets scared and shouts while standing there. He gets the message that the souls of Kan's ancestors are thrilled by his affection toward Kan, and emerges from underground. As the souls step toward him, he fearfully steps backwards, then raises his voice, calling Khan to look at this, but as soon as he turns his head, Khan is sitting near his son's grave, snoring. Youngwoo angrily asks him how he can fall asleep in this situation. He is a crazy older man while Khan is still snoring. However, the souls of people buried their move toward Youngwoo, saying nice to meet him, Pagma descendant friend of their descendant. As the souls step toward him, he fearfully shouts and runs. After some time, Youngwoo stands there silently, and Oliver's souls stand before him, saying he hopes he will become an existence greater than Pagma's. A friend of their descendant finally leaves his father in his care. Seeing this, Youngwoo silently stands there and smiles, replaying of course, leaving him to him. Hearing this, Oliver smiles and is satisfied. However, they sit in the cemetery from morning to evening. Khan wakes up from sleep. As he was sleeping, putting his head on the tombstone of Oliver's grave, he woke up, asking Youngwoo when he was asleep. While thinking the sun is already setting, Youngwoo stands there and replies older people shouldn't sleep anywhere, and, from now on, take better care of themselves. Youngwoo stood there looking toward the sun that was about to set, and Khan sat near the grave of his son and got emotional. When Youngwoo asks him to take better care of himself and then sit there, he emotionally asks why, but then Khan gets up and steps toward Youngwoo, asking if he is standing like this. And Youngwoo stands ahead of him, looking toward the setting. Sun fearfully replies don't pay attention while thinking ghosts are scary. Also, his pants are wet because he was peed inside his pants. Hiro stands outside the Khan smithy the next day, thinking what he should do. Will he be pleased to see him? Standing outside the smithy, Hiro fearfully says he will ask why he is late. Various questions were coming to his mind. However, 40 days have passed since Hiro cleared the wait quest. He spent a week in the hospital as the SA group had advised him. He also received this offer of revealing his identity as the first user with a second class and spent a week trying to decide whether to accept it and not. Then he was resting and returned to the game 3 days ago. After improving his understanding of his new class, he finally came to Khan's smithy to meet Youngwoo, who had sworn to save him. Hiro dares to knock on the smithy door. As the door opens, he finds Youngwoo standing at the door wearing the bag on the shoulder. Sees Hiro there. Youngwoo gets a little surprised, and Hiro excitedly looks toward him and kneels before him, saying his liege is Hiro. Youngwoo still stands at the door and looks toward Hiro. Nell before him asks Hiro, and Hiro blushes and looks up, answering yes to his liege. Youngwoo pulls his shirt and lifts him, saying it is the perfect time. He is an idiot. Hiro fearfully asks what Youngwoo is looking at him and shouts, asking if he knows him. He asks if he knows, and then Youngwoo angrily asks why he blabbers the knights about him even though they are strangers. He was disqualified from the competition, locked in jail, massacred by the knights, and had to follow a crazy and terrifying girl because of him as Youngwoo lifted him while shouting at him. Hiro looks toward him fearfully and silently watches this all happening. Then Youngwoo calls at him, asking if he knows how much he went through. Hiro fearfully replies to his liege, and then sits at Youngwoo's feet and apologizes for everything. He also says everything is his fault. Youngwoo stands before him, angrily looks toward him sitting before him, and thinks, why does he keep calling him that? Then he asks himself if he got a screw loose in his head. Is it because of spending time in jail? Then he thinks, questioning himself, maybe because of the torture. After this, Youngwoo ignores him and steps ahead, sighing, saying forget about it, leave already, while Hiro quickly gets up and turns his head, asking Youngwoo where. Youngwoo waves his hand, replaying where he belongs. While Hiro stands behind, gets surprised, and then surprisingly says, a descendant of the Blue Wolf never breaks their vows. Hiro thinks it's also beneficial for the Apostle of Justice and the Apostle of Justice partner to be together. Then Hiro raises his voice, saying he belongs next to him, his liege. Youngwoo turns his head and angrily looks toward him. He says this crazy man, and Hiro stands behind him, smiling and answering his liege. If he is in a guild, allow him to join it as well. He will follow him wherever to serve him. Hearing this, Youngwoo clenches his teeth and angrily looks toward him, replies he is not part of anything, so get lost already. While Hiro stands behind Blush, answering that he should create his guild, many people will gather around him due to his just heart. Youngwoo furiously looks toward him, thinking he is busy crafting items he will need for his class quest, so stop bothering him. However, Youngwoo gives an irritated expression as he warns him to stop this nonsense and be on his way. While Hiryo stands there, he gets disappointed and sad and says his liege with a sad face. After this, Youngwoo goes on a journey to find and collect the material for the items he would craft for the administrator. While on the way, wearing a bag on their shoulder, he passed by barren places. He passed by the forest on his feet. While Hiryo also follows him wherever Youngwoo goes, he hides behind the tree, thinking it's wrong to disobey his liege. But the descendants of the Blue Wolf never break their vows. It was getting dark when Youngwoo came to collect the material, and Huiro followed him. However, Youngwoo falls into the night during his journey and decides to stay in the forest for that night. There, he decided to make a small fire in the forest with wood and steam the meat to prepare his food, but as soon as he lit the fire, it raining heavily, and because of the heavy rain, his food and the fire get destroyed. At the same time, he sits there silently in the rain, and he gets disappointed. As he sits there, he gets up and goes to the side of the small hill to avoid the rain, but as soon as he gets to the side of the mountain, a pebble comes from behind and hits on him hard in the face. Moreover, Youngwoo gets sad and starts crying. After some time, he eats the same undercooked meat to fill his stomach. He was about to bite the meat. Meanwhile, a squawk stole the food from his hand and flew away. Youngwoo, with a sad face, looks toward his empty hands and starts sobbing. While Hiryo is watching this, everyone hides behind what he also creates, and with teary eyes, he thinks he might protect him. Then, while thinking, he questions himself, how can a human be so unlucky? While Youngwoo was obtaining misfortune instead of riches on his journey for materials, the world of satisfaction was greatly shaken. The Yaten church subjugation had occurred across the north. At the end of the brutal battle, the power of God Yaten had manifested. The birth of the 8 servants. Yura had broken the limits of a black magician, and was approaching her path to completion. However, the window notification shows that the Yaten church's influence is increasing globally. The minimum level of the Yaten believers has risen from 160 to 170. Also, another notification window appears that if the Yaten church continues to grow at this pace, it will become large and influential enough to find a country of its own. Therefore, to hinder the growth of a pseudo-religion that harmed others as a sacrifice, dozens of nations united and gave their users a subjugation quest. However, the Yaten church bishop's first servant, Black Magician Talos, shouts at the army, showing these heretics the might of God Yaten. Also, Erlstein stands with his shout, this time getting rid of all the seeds of the Yaten church in the north. However, the battle started between the Alliance and the Yaten church. It was the beginning of a big episode that would greatly affect the continent's future, and the report about that battle was on every news channel. The news reporters informed the public about the ban, asking if the story would develop if they established a nation. Moreover, it was the biggest incident ever since the release of Satisfy. It drew the whole world's attention and caused an uproar due to this unprecedented war. While on the news channel, this war was discussed, and the news reporter and other news anchors were talking about it. Also, we were analyzing the current incident with the Yaten church, as the news reporter asked his guest to analyze the current war situation. The news anchor answers him as he may already know that the cause of this incident is the 8 servants. They also recently learned that this individual is not an NPC but a user. Hearing this, the news reporter asks the guest if the 8 servants are users, and only one person comes to mind. Then he says, placing 5th in the unified ranking, the blood which Yura shows her picture on the TV screen, and the news reporter says everyone must pay attention to her. On the other side, Youngwoo was busy chopping the firewood. As he sat outside the smithy, a notification appeared before him. It was written on the interface that the quest subdued 25 members of the Yaten church. Youngwoo read that notification, questioning himself a question about the Yaten. Whatever. Again, this quest keeps popping up recently. Then he touched the notification, closed it with a sad face, and sighed, telling himself who cares. However, some users should have paid more attention to the world. Then Youngwoo sat on the wooden stool, looked toward the armor on the table before him, and thought clearing a single class quest would solve many of his problems. He more and less completed rare and epic equipment using the ores he gathered in the last 10 days. Then he thought the only problem was with equipment of this level. The Kesson Canyon still needs to be solved. The Kesson Canyon is considered one of the worst areas in the north. It's also difficult to tread on its uneven terrain. What's even worse are the caves hidden within the canyon, which are packed with monsters at level 160 at least. However, sitting there, he scratches his head, thinking it's not one of Winston's 5 forbidden areas for nothing. and he died over 10 times there in the quest for Asher. He was sitting there thinking while Hiryo, hiding behind the wall, was watching him. Hiryo kept an eye on him constantly. He stood there looking toward Youngwoo, thinking his liege had been behaving like that for the past few days. Thinking about this, he starts sobbing and putting his hand on his mouth. He thinks about what he should do, whether to ask him, or he will get mad. Then he stood there questioning himself whether he should get permission before talking and what he should do. While Youngwoo sits there, he thinks it's not completely impossible. He has become incomparably stronger than before. Sitting there, Youngwoo scratched his hair again, thinking he still couldn't stand a chance. Then he questioned himself. Should he challenge it after raising his level to 150? No, it will take too long. Furthermore, he thinks he wants to become overheated by getting drunk, so he asks himself what he should do now. Youngwoo sits there, holding his head down, considering these thoughts will drive him crazy. Then suddenly, he remembers and feels, waits and overhears. Considering this, he excitedly gets up and cheers while Hiryo stands at his back, sees this and gets surprised, thinking about what is happening. After this, Youngwoo checks his stats and the notification appears before him. While checking his status, he asks himself if he is a moron and whether the failure is an absurd design after getting killed over 10 times by the monsters in the canyon. While the world was in turmoil due to a war in a certain corner of the continent, a notification appeared before Youngwoo. His legendary blacksmith creation skill was also written on the notification that when he skill legendary blacksmith's craftsmanship level up, the user gains 3 new creation slots and 5 free item production slots over 6. Reading that notification, Youngwoo stands there and thinks he knows them like the back of his hand as long as it's not an unreasonable design. He can make 1 item to counter them. Considering this, he clenches his fist and enthusiastically thinks he could even try to make a failure. Also, a brand new item was created. However, the Eternal Kingdom is one of the 5 forbidden areas of Kessen Canyon, a location with countless caves containing level 160 monsters. Youngwoo's folded arm sits outside the smithy on the wooden block. Also the interface appears before him. He reads the interface thinking he died so many times for Asher's quest over there. He is still too weak at his current level, but he doesn't even have time to level up since he has to make money to repay his mountainous debts. A notification window appeared before him, and it was written on that notification window that the legendary blacksmith created free items production slots 5 over 6. Youngwoo read that the interface appeared before him and thought he had no choice in item creation. Then he thinks he needs to make an item to match the Kessen Canyon's characteristics. Furthermore, he doesn't need to worry about stamina despite those rough terrains he can recover through his stamina stat. Moreover, he thinks those level 60 monsters are the problem. They stay hidden in their caves and jump out on passing adventures. While thinking this, he holds his head, then after a minute he sighs and starts thinking again. Then holding his head, he thinks he will need a weapon of the same rank as the Sword of Self-Transcendence at least as he sits there. Suddenly near his feet, a line of ants on the ground pass by him while he sits there holding his head thinking how can he make another masterpiece like that. This thought was driving him crazy. Sit there holding his head asking himself, is there no way to just think? As he was thinking this all, suddenly he noticed that line of an ant on the ground that was in line was passing by him toward the other side of the tree. He stares at a line of ants passing by him and gets up thinking does he even need to fight them? He could try avoiding them without fighting. Then the idea came to his mind and he think using something like an invisibility cloak. After this, he goes to the smithy where Khan is hammering the heated iron rod. Seeing him there, Khan looks toward him asking for materials for stealth items. What about silver dragon scales? Youngwoo stands beside the table, puts his arm on the table and looks toward Khan asking about the silver dragon. Khan, putting that iron rod in the furnace blast, replies, right, they are a species of dragon.